So, hello everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, very good morning. My name is Christian Wattinger. I'm the Group Head of IT Solutions at wega, and I have the pleasure to welcome you this morning for the second wega breakfast of this year, and I will gladly say a few words before we start. Also, a special welcome for our watchers on the YouTube stream, so very welcome also for the remote crowd. Today the topic is Agile validation in GxP projects. So Evelyn and Matthias have both experience with these topics, with the Agile methodologies and also computer system validation. So today they will tell us how these two concepts, which at first sight not work very well together, probably, how we can combine these to the success of a project. But let me first say a few words about wega. So wega is really building the bridge between the business and IT. So what does that mean? I mean, we understand really the business, and the business we mean the life science and pharma business. We have people that are trained in these areas as well, by education. And on the other side, we also have in our DNA also the IT gene, and we understand very well how we can use IT to make these, to meet these business demands. So wega is organized in 4 competence centers, actually. So first of all, we have our lab and research team. These are really experts in everything related to lab and research processes. So topics there are about lab automation, electronic lab notebooks, lab information management, all these kinds of topics. Then we have an expert team in the clinical development IT area, where they know, they understand very well about the processes in the clinical trials, in the biomarkers, in all these kind of topics. And then we have the IT solutions group, which is more the technical group, where we provide the technical solutions, the software implementations, software management, software outsourcing for the related systems. And of course, last but not least, the computer system validation and quality assurance is a very important topic, of course, in the pharma world. Things have to be validated, and this is also what we're going to hear today about. At wega, we have around 70 highly qualified employees, and all together, all groups together, we can really close this circle and really serve the full circle of the pharma IT landscape. Before we start, let me quickly highlight a few of the upcoming events. So we have very soon in Basel, we have Damian talking about approaches and challenges in big data. So that's the guy in the red shirt. You can talk to him afterwards about that. Then also in June still, we have a talk about supplier selection for cloud-based computers. That's in the CSV area. That's Christoph will talk about that. He couldn't be here today. And then in a glimpse for the future in October, so we have 2 sessions. One is in Berlin at ExpoMed, where we moderate a panel, and the other one is the LIMS Forum in Jülich, Germany. So the guy in green, you can talk to later in the breakfast. That's Daniel from our lab and research IT team. So, and of course, we might have another breakfast later this year. So talking about breakfast. So what will it be for breakfast today? So we will have some food for the brain that we will have with our 2 speakers just in a minute. And then we will have some food for the body as well, with the drinks and croissant over there. And then we'll leave it to you to have very inspiring talks between each other and enjoy the start of the day. So, that said, I would like to hand over to our speakers. Where are they? Yeah. So, welcome. Come to the stage. I will leave it to you as well to introduce yourself. And we'll gladly hand over. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Christian, for this wonderful introduction. Can you hear me well? Is it okay? Great. Yes, today we're going to talk about agility in validated environments, and I think it's a very interesting topic, and showing up so many people shows that we are again found, I think, a very interesting topic for today. I'm very impressed to have so many people here, a couple of these also not only here but also on the live stream. And well, for today, we thought, when we saw that so many registrations came up, I said together with Evelyn, I thought, hey, Evelyn, we just cannot do something very common, just a common presentation, standing here showing slides. Can't we do something slightly different? And then we came up with the idea that we do a kind of conversation. So Evelyn and myself will have now a kind of conversation, and we show the slides in the background. So the scene or the situation is the following. It's Evelyn, of course, from the validation department of wega, myself from the software development department, and it's two colleagues. They know each other since quite a long time, but they haven't seen each other since a while because they're very busy. I mean, wega is successful, so we're all very busy. And now they meet at the coffee corner. So this is the coffee corner should be the coffee corner of wega. They meet at the coffee corner, and then they start a kind of conversation. I hope it's kind of entertaining, it's kind of informative, and I also hope that afterwards we have interesting, maybe contradictory discussions. Let's see what happens.
Maybe let us just first introduce ourselves.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Evelyn Daniel. I'm working since almost 25 years in the life science pharma industry. The first 6 years I was working in analytical laboratories, research and development, and then QC. In 2001 I moved to application management of lab data systems, where I implemented software, performed changes. Then I moved to management position as project manager, CSV lead, acting in LIMS environment, lab automation, for example. And in 2016, I moved to wega. There I'm part of the CSV team, where I'm leading a validation project and acting also as business analyst. Matthias?
My name is Matthias Fox. I have a background in biotechnology 200 years ago. Then I switched over to the IT. I became a software developer, Java, web application, all that kind of stuff. I'm in IT now since about nearly 18 years. And in addition to pure software development, since nearly 10 or 12 years, I also do care about Agile methodologies, everything about Agile. I'm a member of the Swiss ICT Agile Breakfast event series and these kind of things. And yeah, generally I'm interested in everything that has to do with Agile, and especially with success and failure of these Agile transformations.
Thank you, Matthias. So before we start, I would like to ask our audience to raise your hand if you have already experience in software validation or in computer system validation. Almost everybody.
As expected. Great.
And raise your hand if you have experience in Agile methodology, Agile software development. It's very interesting. So a lot of people are lucky. They know both sides a little bit. So we hope we will give you some information, but also that we can share afterwards your experience. Okay, let's start. Huh?
Yeah, let's start.
Hi, Matthias. How are you? It's been a while since we met.
Hey, Evelyn. Yeah, that's true.
I'm wondering, as far as I know, you are one of our experienced Scrum Master and you are dealing with a lot of agile topics, aren't you?
Yes, that's true. And yeah, it's really a long time that we haven't seen each other. And it's really good to see you. But yes, you're right. I'm since a couple of years, I'm involved in many Agile projects and kind of experience. And I'm also interested in the whole topic.
Do you have time to discuss now a little bit with me on this topic?
For you, always, of course.
You.
I mean, that's clear. I always like discussing with you, but one thing I wonder, I mean, you're from validation department.
Yes.
And you're interested in agility?
Yes, because we are facing challenges every day, and the environment is very dynamic, and I think Agile might help us.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. So,
do you want some insights about validation?
Yes. So the thing is, could you? I mean, I'm from the software development team, and I have a kind of experience also in validation. But could you please explain me the real basics? What is validation about?
So as we saw, a lot of people knows already a lot about validation, but I think one sentence explains it quite well. It's from the FDA, and basically the validation is establishing documented evidence, which provides a high degree of assurance that a specific process will consistently produce a product meeting its predetermined specification and quality attributes. So basically, it's trust of your data, trust of your product, and that's for the patient.
Okay, that's quite a good explanation. I understand that. Although, I mean, of course, I personally have my problems with these predetermined specifications. You know, as in Agile, we think a bit differently. But you've been talking about problems.
Yeah, a lot of challenges. Yeah,
a lot of challenges. Can you tell me a little bit more about?
Yes, for sure. So from my experience, often in validation projects, we are challenging with the requirements. Because as we have to provide them at the beginning, before something can start, you have to put everything together, but sometimes you don't know all requirements, or the business analysis might not be completed, or even you have some changing requirements in your process. And often, due to the fact that you have to put all requirements at the beginning of a project together, the requirements are not focused. So everybody said, oh, I need that, I need that, I need that. And then you end up with a big amount of requirements, but they are not always focused. So then you have to choose how you start, and it's quite complex. A second area where we face challenges is in a design and development and verification phase. It's very slow because everything is going sequentially. So it's very rigid. You have to tackle some issues with doing some prototyping or pilots, but they are not documented. You have delayed decision with the formal process, so there you have to wait again. And even because of the high overhead of documentation, you might not document every decision, so you lack in transparencies. And at the end, because of this long phase, sequential phase, long testing, the end user often are not enough involved. They are involved in the beginning when the requirements engineering is done, and at the end when they do the end user testing. And they may see, it's not exactly what I wanted. So missing functionalities or learnings are discovered too late in the process, and improvements are not always possible anymore. So what we often see is that you have to make some workarounds or some compromise. So the solution is not optimal. So you see, it's quite complex, which kind of challenges we have with the traditional V model.
That's a lot of information. And the thing is, that sounds very similar to what we do in the non-validated environments.
Okay.
There are a lot of these things are really similar. Of course, you have more these problems with the documentation, following the processes, but it's not that much different. But you said one word. you use the term complex. That's interesting. It's really interesting because I hear it a lot of times that people mixing up different terms. Do you really know the difference between complex and complicated?
Matthias, we've trained this presentation quite a few times, so yes, I know, but maybe...
Wasn't planned.
Let's ask our audience if you know the difference between complex and complicated. Who knows it? Or thinks he knows it? No?
Anyone
Okay.
who is sure to know the difference between complicated and complex?
I think maybe you can explain a little
That's
bit.
perfect. That's perfect because then I can explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one guy called Dave Snowden. I mean, we cannot. It's a huge topic, but I try to explain it very briefly. There's one guy called Dave Snowden, and he tried to categorize from system theory what kind of systems there are out there that we can be in. And the first type of system which are possible are so-called ordered systems. The second one is complex, and the third one is chaotic. So ordered systems can be subdivided into two subcategories, which is simple and complicated. So simple is quite simple because the relationship between cause and effect in these systems is obvious to anybody. Everybody knows. You don't need any expertise. It's obvious. Like playing pool billiard. If I hit one ball, then I'm quite sure what will happen. Approach of handling this kind of systems is sense, categorize, respond. That means I observe something, I clearly can categorize it, and I can react on that. And we're talking about best practice, because there's one approach that has been proven over the time to be the best. On the other hand, there's the complicated systems, which are still linear, which are still ordered, but a bit more complicated. So you need subject matter expertise, you need the SMEs, you need someone who really understands the system. It's not so obvious. So the approach is quite different. So we do sense, analyze, respond. And here we're talking about good practice. It's a difference. Quite often we mix best and good practice, because in complicated systems, there might be many solutions or many approaches that lead to a good solution. It's not the only one. On the other hand, or on the other side, we have the nonlinear systems, complex. And the complex system can be described as that relationship between cause and the effects, or the causes and the resulting effect, is not predictable beforehand. You have many causes that are interlinked with each other, and if you just make an action on one hand, it can have influences on other, and you cannot predict the effect. It's very, very important to get the difference, because it's a complete different approach how to handle this system. It's probe, sense, respond. I cannot, by deep analysis or by just more planning, trying to manage the system. And the fourth one is chaotic, which is described by complete absence of any relationship between cause and effect. And if we're in this system, the first thing we have to do is to stabilize the system somehow. So it's important to understand the differences. Another aspect is if you are here, if you are in a complex environment, it is possible to handle it. If you're in a complicated, in a linear environment, other way around, it is possible to handle it with complex approaches. It's not effective. Scrum does work. You can use Scrum also in very simple environments. It does work, but it's not very effective. The other way around, and that's the thing, it's not possible. You cannot handle or manage a complex environment with these linear approaches, like the waterfall, for example. It will fail. because there's too many dynamics. Okay. Okay, and this is the so-called barrier between chaotic and ordered systems. If you're trying, as I said, if you're trying to manage a complex system with a linear approach, the risk is quite high that you fall over this cliff and you end up in a chaotic environment.
Right.
And recovery from this chaos is quite hard thing to do.
That's something that we don't
So
want.
it's very important to know, to just know where we are.
To understand the system. Okay, and you were talking about Scrum, for example, to bring complex systems in complicated systems?
Yeah, I mean, Scrum, for example, does nothing else than switching from complex to complicated,
Okay.
in my opinion. Because what you do in Scrum is you reduce the amount of workload to a small package, smaller package, and you go into a closed environment, the so-called sprint. And the sprint is closed, it's protected from the outside. So you're just shifting from complex to complicated in Scrum.
Okay. Maybe let us have a look into the Agile Manifesto. Huh? That's maybe a starting point. And so the Agile Manifesto is a set of high-level rules that have been put in place to allow teams or development teams to work more efficient and to react rapidly to change. That's correct. Huh?
Yeah.
And when I look there and I see, for example, working software over comprehensive documentation in validation, main aspect that we need or that we might need is documentation. So I don't see how it could work that I put the documentation on the side. Or responding to change over following a plan. I mean, in the validation, if I accept and face changes permanently, per se, I'm not sure that it's the right approach and that it will work for the validation.
You're right. I mean, the manifesto is about 20 to 25 years old, and I don't think they had really this big validated environments in their mind.
Yes,
but
you might be right.
One thing you have to see. No, if you go
sorry.
Back, they're writing working software over comprehensive documentation. Okay. It's not instead of.
Yeah.
It's not instead of. You could perfectly include maybe some kind of validation tasks into your product. But I see your point. And maybe let's go back to some basics of agility. I mean, Agile is not Scrum. Scrum is one method, but Agile methods are based on, let's say, 3 basic pillars. They're empiric, and they are based on transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Okay. Whatever that means. Scrum is one implementation of that. There could be many others. But it's important to have these 3 basic pillars. Because transparency, be as transparent as possible. Not to lose time, not to have conversations that lead to nothing. Everybody should see and be able to give input. Inspection, as soon as possible, inspect what you have done. So to be able to, not to lose time, be effective, and be able to do some adaptation afterwards.
Okay.
Because, as I said, it's empiric. That means you assume that you're not perfect right from the beginning. You have a good idea, you do a proper planning, yes, but it will not be perfect. You will have to adapt over time. Okay. It's very important, independent of the concrete methodology.
Adaptation.
And, I mean, so from my perspective, as I see it, transparency and inspection, I think that should be something you in validation should really love.
Sure.
With adaptation, I'm not that sure.
That's exactly where we need some new idea in order to be able to react more flexibly to changes. So I'm curious in more details.
There's another way how to explain agility. You always start with an MVP, and then you improve your product step by step, and you have an incremental, iterative approach of doing that. So MVP, you know, that's the minimal viable product.
No,
so
master validation plan.
For you, it's master validation?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we again have some basic terminology.
Yes.
Go on, it's perfect. So for us, it's the minimal viable product.
Okay.
And that means, That means I start with something. I have a rough idea, so it's not like in the picture above that I have from the beginning a car in mind, and I start with some which I cannot, because I can't use. Just if I have a wheel, I can't do anything with it.
You're right.
But if I start with something to drive, I need something to drive, then I could start, for example, with a skateboard. It's something that I can use to drive. And then next iteration, okay, but it's not that perfect. I need something to steer. Let's add a steering wheel. And then we need to become faster. And at the end, we end up with a perfect car.
Yeah, I mean, I like really the elements that you just mentioned, but looking back to what I explained before and my challenges, do you really think with Agile approach we could find solutions?
I think so. I think so. I think a lot of your challenges could be addressed.
Maybe.
And one thing really for Agile methods you have to take into account, it's always product and user focused. It's always about reducing overhead. We always want to create better products faster. How we do that? We have fast feedback cycles with all the stakeholders, with all the users, to really stay on track and not to lose time to go into the wrong direction. Another aspect, for us, a product is never finished. Like for you, I mean, with the V, I mean, you have with the V model, for example, you start here, and after you have all your tests, it could be somehow finished for you. But the product is never finished; it evolves. So we need this iterative approach. And of course, we have this satisfaction level on the IT, on the developer side, and on the business side. Because if you can deliver something quite fast and you get a good feedback, that's something you feel good for a developer.
Sure, yeah.
And the business gets the best products. It's empiric. I said it before. So we are able to react on these changing environments using some kind of methodologies. I'm not saying Scrum is the best, but an agile approach. We're creating this MVP because we know we don't have a fully completed URS, and we know, and we have to we create cultures where teams are able to learn and to improve. Very important.
Interesting.
So it's also a mindset change. And as I said with the skateboard like before, I mean, there are established frameworks out there. There's Scrum, there's Safe, there's you name it. They're working, they're established. But it's not about chaos. Maybe sometimes I hear about, this is a fancy kind of thing, this is completely chaotic, absence of rules. No, we have very clear rules. We're following these rules.
Okay.
That's very important. And we have these short iterations, we have regular plannings to reduce this complexity, because we know that we are in a complex environment.
You're right.
And of course, very important, there's tools available. We cannot live without good tools. And there's a huge toolset available, Jira, Confluence, for example.
Okay.
Yeah?
Sounds really easy.
No, it's not easy.
No, because, so to be honest, I tried already a few times to make some kind of agile validation, and from my point of view, it was not so successful, or I still think there are rooms for improvements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more? That's it, because I'm not.
Yeah, I will give you a few examples. So,
what have you done?
So basically, with the teams, we try to define together how we want to deliver a project in a validated way with some agile elements. So usually we did a workshop with the all members, so IT, validation, business, project management, developers, and we had a look into the all documentation we needed to provide, the deliverables, the software, and we defined, okay, what do we see we can keep waterfall, and what or in V-model, and what do we want to do agile? Okay. So we had this discussion, and then we categorize all deliverables in these two categories. Sometimes we also had some elements we said, that is not part of the validation, like project management activities. Then we identified the sprints. So we had these sprint phases. We said, okay, we will start with a sprint planning. We will do a sprint review, what we want to do in these sprints. And we even defined the acceptance criteria for all our documents, what you call, I think, definition of done.
Yep.
So there we decided, for example, for some document to have them approved, for some other not, just in a final status. And we even defined tools. We worked with Jira, we worked with electronic document management system to approve the documentation. And when we were done with all these definitions and the team agreed to the plan, then we put everything in the validation plan. So that was defined, and then we could start.
Yeah, but it sounds good. I mean, this is...
Yeah, the idea was good, and
Yeah.
some elements were certainly good. We had also some good experience. We saw very fast benefits in the development progress. So the adaptability during design and build phase was of the major trigger that we had on to be able to develop incrementally was very good. We had a fast development progress. Also to bring teams together and to merge the different branches of the solution in a product. But we've again faces challenges. One big challenge was the transparency regarding total progress, especially when people were asked, what is the status of this? That's almost done. Yeah, but what is almost done? Is it 50%, 90%, 99%? It's not possible to understand or to know exactly what is meant with that. Then the focus was mainly on development. We saw that. So developer with business analysts were involved, but it was less on testing and on documentation. So that resulted in a lot of activities to be done afterwards. The integration of CSV was difficult in the daily activity. So the CSV cannot check what the developer is doing and say, but you have to document. The systematic usage of tools. In Jira, for example, but it's with all tools the same, you might open a lot of tasks, but if nobody is monitoring them, then so it's as good as the people are using it, and really be accurate and focused on closing and on documenting everything. So the process understanding and adaptation was difficult.
I see. But you see, you already saw some benefits of it.
Yes.
You had benefits. And I think it was a good idea to start with that.
Yes.
A few things maybe. I mean, you were not far away from the goal in my perspective. But one question: did you have an experienced team in terms of agility? Do you think, in your perspective?
You mean the member of the teams?
The members and the organization?
I would say not really.
Okay. So, as I said, it's really good that you started with something. And I think you already saw the first steps and the first improvements. From what I see, I mean, there might be many more aspects, but the first things that I see from your approach, team maturity, mindset. It's very important to have this agile mindset, to understand what agility means.
Okay.
Not just following the process. It's not about just following processes. It's also understanding what's behind it. Empowerment and all these kind of things. Then, as you said, the
CSV activities.
CSV activities have not been completely incorporated. So validation, I think the validation tasks have not been part of your product.
It should be.
Yeah?
Yeah, maybe not
And
sufficiently.
that's the second thing. And of course, you talked about sprint review and sprint planning, but I've never heard about the retrospective. Did you do a retrospective?
No.
Okay. This is very important to have this feedback cycle. Because if it's empiric, you have problems, and problems are good. It's not that we have a problem with the problem, but we see the benefit of it because we are able to improve. But of course, we need to involve these feedback cycles.
So not stick to the validation plan all the time.
And if you do that, then you will slightly over time become better and better.
Okay.
So you were on the right track, but
should we maybe try to put it in a model?
Yes.
As we just discussed. So maybe the approach that we tried It's something like this, huh? So in English, it would be a scare cat.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, so one part of the process agile, and some parts still in the V model. What I tried a few times to do is to move even the FSDS in this part, so that is really the discussion that can happen.
Yeah.
And also the testing, maybe some parts can be done in the agile part, and then you keep parts in really in the V model. So you start, you freeze your requirements. That was not so successful, from my point of view.
Well, I didn't know this model, but the thing is, it's a start.
Yeah.
It's a start because you have a kind of agility, at least in the development process. What I still see, I mean, you have these two big ears, and that's still the V model. The V model is still covering the whole thing. So from my perspective, what happens if you find some problems or improvements or whatever within the development process or step? Then you really again have to go back
you still
through
have
the left ear and then to the right ear, and
you still have this problem of the freeze user requirements, the challenges I mentioned before.
You don't have really this adaptability in that process, but it's a start.
Maybe for a complicated environment.
Yeah, there might for simple or complicated.
Okay. Do you have other ideas?
Let me think. Why could we? I mean, I'm just thinking. Why can't we just put a whole validation and implementation step in one sprint, in one iteration? So doing really a completely a full agile validated implementation.
Sprint, okay.
In each sprint. Exactly.
So everything.
So we would,
Okay.
The thing is, I like to have one product backlog, which collects all the requirements. And out of this product backlog, we can prioritize the newest or the highest priority requirements. The ones that have been the biggest value, the ones that have been the best specified, and we put them in a sprint backlog.
Okay. I like this.
This is how we do in non-validated normally, in Scrum, for example. And then we could go into a complete cycle. We could create a definition of done, having all the documents, the URS, the FS, design specification. We do the implementation, and we do a testing. I mean, and we come out with a fully validated increment.
Yeah, but
why not?
I don't think it's the right approach, Matthias, because here you lose, so you will have a huge overhead of documentation for each sprint, and I understood Agile that you also can react fast on changes, so that you can also take decisions and then see, oh, maybe this way would be better, so you go back, and if you do that for all, you might, so here, okay, you have a reduction of the scope, that's good. But there, I'm afraid that you will lose your flexibility, and then you will maybe say, okay, I will not change because I have done the all validation, and so you lose this chance to get to the optimal product. So I
get your point.
I'm not sure that it's the right approach, because the validation is still a kind of overhead.
Yeah, okay. So
maybe we can combine both approach.
Could we do?
What about this?
Well, I think I like this because I still like the idea of having the requirements in a kind of system in a backlog and then taking out some parts of it in a sprint backlog.
Exactly, this one.
This one.
Yeah.
But I agree that, I mean, if we're in a validated environment, it's a bit different. But can we always have an interdisciplinary team and keeping the validation aspects in mind while doing this sprints and the selection in the backlog? And then we could go into a agile validation with 1, 2, 3 iterations and preparing as much as possible what is needed for the final validation step. Again, that would mean having validation people in the team, for example.
Yeah, I think that would be important.
Yeah, and then we have a test release, and then afterward, maybe release 1 or I don't know, just a test release. And then after that, we do a real final complete V model just for validation.
So you mean the formal documentation and testing? Yeah, so the advantage would be that the agility is kept in the development, but it will just work if the documentation is really done immediately during the process. Yeah. So at the end, you should really have everything almost ready to do the formal testing. And then I think it could work. So it's also an option. Huh?
Yeah.
So, but however, which options someone takes, huh?
Well, it's important to know that this is not. I mean, there's many options, and it's very individual. Yes, we cannot say we just have one plan, one methodology, and this one size fits all approach doesn't work here, in my opinion.
You're right.
You have to be individual. You have to see every project on its own. You have to see in the context of an organization. So it's very individual.
And then I would put the chosen approach, in this case, our mixed form. In a validation plan that can evolve, because you spoke about adaptability. Yeah. So it must be possible to adapt the framework in the course of the project. Also to define the go-live activities is really important. So it's not just the testing and validation, but then to define how it will be released. Yeah. So there will be probably an installation on a productive environment, training of users. And then for sure there should be some procedure in the background. So I assume you have in Agile also some development guidelines. They should be in place. Change management to
it's
be
good
defined.
Practice to have it.
Yeah. So that would be my recommendation, to make sure that some procedures are in place, which could also evolve.
Yeah.
Okay. And both should work hand in hand. But still, if we do something like that, I think we still need tools. Because without tools, it will not work.
Definitely.
So,
do you have some experience with tooling? I mean,
made some few different approaches, or I saw different frameworks. So one tool set that we see in some projects is to work with Jira for the specification of the software.
I like that. We also use Jira a lot.
To extract those in document that will be formally sent. Yeah. To work with HPILM for the testing.
Mm-hmm. Something we normally...
You don't know? So here you have a good...
Not necessarily used.
A good test. It's an example. Huh? The overhead that results here is that you might have to maintain your requirements also in HPILM. So you have...
So that's a copy-paste step.
Yeah. So that is a little bit... But basically it's helping. What is important is to really specify and work in the tools and the testing. Mm-hmm. Or a more light approach could be to use Jira for all, so to also use the testing, the testing part in Jira. But the important is to define the tools. I guess maybe there are even more that could be used.
There are many more of these tools. I mean, we mainly, I like this approach because we mainly really also use Jira and Confluence, and of course then with some plugins, with some add-ins like Greenhopper for burn down charts and so. But with these two basic platforms, you can do anything if you use it properly, set up properly.
Yes, and what are the... So that is the issue I see. So the tools are good if you have a tool, but how to make sure that it's used properly and that the teams are working together and on time, so immediately, so not waiting, I will do it next week.
That's a very important thing. I mean, team setup and mindset is something that you cannot explain in process. I mean, you need processes and you need tools and you need frameworks, for sure. But that's only half of the truth. The other side is having people with that understand what they're doing, that having this agile mindset, and that's also very individual. But maybe just an example how to, or an idea what can happen, how to set up a team. And I'm talking about innovation and creativity. Why? Yeah. Because I mean, for us, every software system that we do is kind of new. Mm-hmm. We've never done anything before. I don't know, if you do a big LIMS implementation, you might have done something similar, but the specific thing is normally new. and never done
Innovation and creativity is also needed, yes.
Yes. So, an idea how to foster this kind of thing is, for me, and not only for me, also for others, but great diversity. I know that many people are afraid of having diversity and too many different people that don't fit together, but it's crucial to have this diversity in the team. Why? Because only if you have different people, different minds, and different personalities, then there's some kind of the possibility that there, or not a possibility, there will internal tensions will come up, and that's a good thing because. Can you do the next one? Because it leads to an instability. It leads to unstable phases, which is also a very good thing. Because it's a step that you need, because only from unstable phases you have the chance to change something, to switch to a different environment, to a different mindset, to a different process. And this is what we call at the end creativity. You need this kind of changes, you need this kind of dynamic. If you put 5 analytical people in one room, and tell them, look, we have a big problem, we need a complete new product. From scratch, we need something completely new. Normally it doesn't work because they used to think linear, so you need this diversity, And another idea is, I mean, we have something in our head. We have a very good tool in our head, which is adapted since millions of years. And I'm sure you know these 3 types of personalities, and you will find that in every company. This is the creator, the owner, and the broker. If you just have a look at that, you will find them. So the creator is someone, that's these guys, these crazy minds. They always have new ideas. They have 10 new ideas every day. They will not finish one of them, because if they have just started, then they have the next idea. So a lot of dynamic. You have the owners. That's the people that know very in detail about their subject. It's the subject matter experts. The SMEs, the subject matter experts. And you have the brokers. These people, they know everything a little bit, but not very deep. But for sure, they know someone who knows it. They're the networkers. Okay? And if you, for example, put these 3 guys together, these 3 people, you can remodel a simple brain. Because our cortex, this is, if you put the creator and the owner together, this is the idea pool. New ideas will come up. You need this instability and you need the kind of knowledge. Our limbic system, you put the owner and the broker together. These 2, they are able to rate if an idea is valuable or not. And there's something called formatio reticularis. This is an area in the brain that always stimulates, that keeps the dynamic. And you can imagine, if you put the creator and the broker together, there will be a lot of dynamic. And if these people work together, then it's similar to a brain. And it's important to change something, to have new ideas.
Especially in the virtual teams, it's very important, I guess, to involve different type of people. So you would work on team setup also in order to implement Agile in the validation.
It's very important. Understand agility, understand what mindset is needed. Make people aware that there are different personalities and everybody has its role in the team and is important for the success.
So I would agree that the validation is possible with Agile ways, but there are very key factors.
I would even go one step further. I would say there is no alternative from my perspective. There's reasons for that, but so.
Yeah, you're right. So our giveaway would be really to, first of all, identify the project environments. Is it complex? Can we do it in move it to complicated pieces or simple? To define the framework, so validation plan that might also evolve. In the validation, we often have the validation plan is at the beginning and will not change until the end of the project, and every change is a deviation. But maybe to switch this mindset, it's not a deviation, it's an evolution. It's in a positive way, that it's anticipated, it will change. To use tools, we just gave some example, but it's it's important for the collaboration to have tools that everybody understands and know how to use them. And as you just said, to engage people, foster this agile mindset, which is maybe sometimes needs some external view or some coaching to really understand how to do it.
Definitely, for me, people engagement and agile mindset is one of the most underestimated aspects, and one of the biggest risks for these projects or transformations to fail, and should really be taken into account. And
Thank you, Matthias. It was really, really interesting to discuss with you.
As always.
Now we would love to continue the discussion with you, to trigger what is your experience, which issue did you face in your projects, or highlights maybe to share with us, recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for the great talk, Evelyn and Matthias. I hope that your brains got stimulated in a positive way, and I hope there are many questions, so I'll come to you with the microphone.
Thanks a lot. I'm Claudia Hornack at Max Clinical, and I would like to ask your advice for one special kind of challenge. I'm maintaining an EDC database which needs current further development and, of course, validation. And I cut this in very short sprints, but I have one person in my team who, after each sprint and each validation and each setting productive, comes out with, oh, I forgot something, we forgot something, which needs to be implemented in that sprint. I tend to the idea of, well, okay, there's no going back. We always put everything which comes timely in the time after something into the next sprint, but I'm not sure if this is a real good solution, and I would really like to ask your recommendations in that.
I think it's for you, Matthias.
Should I? Okay.
Yeah.
So, have you, just to get you right, you have a development team, or is it just a single person?
It's just myself. It's not very much to do. It's more configure than really develop and program. It's just configuration. So I'm the only person who does that. So I'm doing the configuration and the validation of the EDC database myself.
Okay, but your problem is that there's one person who never finishes the definition of done.
Yeah, of the requirements.
Okay, and this one is not part of a team, but it's you both working together.
Yeah, we're.
So you're the team.
The sponsor, the CRO, and myself. This is a team.
Okay.
But Matthias?
Could be many reasons. Have you asked him? Have you asked him if he has problems? Why he cannot finish?
She has a problem. She is the content person at the CRO, and the CRO, she has the entire CRO team behind her. And sometimes she does not reach decision makers. Sometimes she misunderstands them. Sometimes she misunderstands them. So and they are never really happy with what the sponsor and I decide then. So. But she is a valuable person, and what she says is always right, only the point of time is never right.
Okay.
That's real life, you know. That's real life. It's also with revising SOPs, there's always some gaps or so, you know.
Of course.
You always improve, yeah. That's iterative,
of course.
you know.
But
My name is Carsten Wangnick from Carburg and Amses in Bubendorf.
That's the thing with the mindset. It's not said that, for example, in a sprint, the whole sprint backlog has to be finished. You should try to. But there might be reasons why you cannot do it.
The execution of the sprint, you get new ideas. It's always the case, you know. So you will have always this situation, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see a problem in this, you know. Next sprint, yeah.
Exactly. There are some rules that needs to be known, and if the rules are not
There's a
understood,
freeze
then
at a certain time.
it needs to be reinforced that the rule is okay when the sprint is defined, that it's what will deliver. And if there are good ideas, they will come in next one. And then if it's done 1, 2, 3 sprints, maybe the mindset will change and the person will start thinking ahead and
I mean, you could also see it very positively. I mean, if there is too much work to finish what I've planned to do, then there is issues on the way while implementing it. And then you could just ask, look, what have you done? Okay, I had this problem, I've solved it, I did this and did that and did that. So you've solved many problems on your way. Okay? And this is a big effort, because this is a big improvement. Because it helps you to eliminate this. I mean, you won't have these problems, hopefully. You don't want to have them in the next sprint, and it helps you to improve.
Yeah, this is a very good idea. So I think I will add to my sprint process a step afterwards. Say, so this is left over for the next sprint, and that's that. Then everybody seems to be happy of.
Of course. That's the very important thing. You have the sprint review, the retrospective, and all this kind of thing. And then you discuss, hey, what have you done?
And it's a typical example for the retrospective. In the project I implemented an Agile approach, we didn't do these retrospectives. It's not the same than the sprint review. It's really, the review is looking at what is done, and the retrospective as the process. And that is a typical example of process improvement possibilities or
That's
team.
wonderful. I will add it.
You wanted to, Damien, you wanted to say something?
That should be rather an exception, that you do it that way, like leftovers. So for the next sprint, you should select the smaller scope then. It's not about because if this gets a habit, then it's really, really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
So if you say that, let's say, you reach like 60% of your sprint, and then the next sprint after, you will have the same problem, because the person will say, oh, I haven't reached that. So you'll have, so don't let it be a habit. That's very important, trust me. But the thing is that you maybe have to reduce your scope then. So let's say you have 10 tasks in one sprint, and you finish only 8 of them by the end of the sprint, right? So 2 are left. For the next sprint, you plan them. That's not a problem. But for the next sprint, you should have planning for 8, so 6 additional ones. And then you will see, once you run a couple of sprints, you will see afterwards what is the best amount of tasks to put into your sprint. I would rather go that way instead of having always 10 and then not finishing, because if this gets a habit, you won't get rid of it. But
in my database is costly because I need to touch the entire database.
Right. Right.
You said it's configuration. Configuration for me means you
validate
it once and then you configure as you want.
What I don't understand really is we're talking about software development, and agility is about software development. Where does configuration come into game?
No, but it's, when you talk...
I didn't get it. Maybe I got it wrong, but...
I think if you use modern web-based technology, you can configure quite a lot. And so the difference between software development and configuration gets a bit shifted. If you see a modern EDC, ETMF system where you can build complete workflows on the configuration level, which have a significant impact on your business process, you end up with the same requirements on the configuration level. Yeah. And actually, Claudia just is talking about a configuration task which is organized in sprints, but it's not a seamless development effort that you can plan it like this. We're continuously improving, so it's sprint-like, but it's not real Scrum. So
yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
But I would like to add another idea, which is a bit related to that. I think right at the beginning, when you talked about the first problems I think an important challenge is to identify what is finished and what is done. You had these almost done things. I remember years back when I first introduced Scrum in another organization I was in, we had this painful experience of the almost done things until we explicitly forbid this statement. There's nothing almost done. It's not done or it's done.
Exactly.
And I think the definition of the acceptance criteria while defining the requirement, you had that was for me a first name at this MVP. I come from the area where that's a master validation plan. And the minimal acceptable product. I think that's extremely important when you write down the requirements with the subject matter experts in business analysis, that you really nail down what does it have to be accepted. And this, again, might be an answer to your question. If somebody comes up, but I forgot, you say, fine, that's the next improvement cycle we are going
exactly.
for.
And this is what you said. I mean, what we meant with having some kind of experienced people in the team, because a Scrum Master who has that experience and who knows the process, he would never accept a status called almost done. Because there's the definition of done, so I'm done or I'm not done.
Certainly, but the tendency in an unexperienced team is definitely there.
Yep.
I'm not so familiar with all the terms, you know. Can you explain sprint first, and all these terms?
Okay.
I think that was missing in the presentation a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. So the question was about explaining a sprint, and it was missing a little bit the explanation. Yeah. A sprint is a time-framed development cycle where the development team gets their task beforehand. So they do the sprint planning. They get their tasks in the sprint backlog. They estimate it. They take it and they say, okay, in the next 2 weeks we're going to implement or finish these tasks. And the development team is responsible in the next 2 weeks, with the help of the Scrum Master, for example, to finish these tasks. And this is the sprint.
No, it's a time frame. It's a time box. A sprint is.
The advantage, you know, you always do your development independent of the GxP documents, you know.
No, but for the traditional, you mean waterfall. I do a specification, I do requirements, my user specification, then the design specification, then I implement, and then I test. You mean that by traditional?
I never did this because from my heart, I already do this in this way. I always say, sign the URS as lately as possible, you know, because it changes, you know. I don't like to have this signed document that you can start only with a signed document.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that.
And as the URS changes, and as we assume and we know that it will change, we take a small part out of let's say we have 150 requirements. And for the next sprint, for the next 2 weeks, we take out of these 150, we take 10. I'm going to implement that. And we rate them, which is the most valuable, which is the highest priority, with the most value for the users. And then we implement it, and we test it, and we release it. So after 2 weeks, we have a fully working, tested, working increment of the software for the user. And there's no way to disturb in these 2 weeks.
Yes, I think
there's
maybe the input.
There's no.
Sorry, I think we're running a bit out of time. I think might be
But we
one
can
last
talk
question.
later.
Can we talk later?
There will be interesting discussions afterwards, I'm sure. So one last question for Mark.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks a lot for the great presentation. Assuming that you have a huge system with a huge configuration layer, and you want to go for a phased approach to release functionality or value as early as possible, I think this all fits well. But what are you doing with the not released functionality if you can't disable it? Do you have any thoughts or experience, like risk assessments, or what would be your recommendation on that?
Good question. by the way.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you.
I mean, if you can't disable it, you mentioned risk assessment. I think it's a major aspect. If you can accept the risk and train the user for a small period, or if you can analyze what could happen in worst case. If you cannot, then I would not go with this stage release approach, because you might create data you don't want to create. So it's really important to assess the risk. And if you have some elements that are not validated or not tested in your productive environment, I would, be very careful there.
I mean, from approach number 3, if I get you correctly, from approach number 3 that we showed, the most important thing is that you, as soon as possible, deliver some kind of haptic working increment to a user, so they can work with something, from my perspective. So do it without having a risk assessment, for example, but deliver something you can work with, and maybe plan for the next iteration, for the next release, to really finish this risk assessment. I'm not saying this is a product. What we showed here with the milestone, it doesn't necessarily have to be a productive version, but it has to be something where you can work with. No?
Okay, thanks a lot again, Evelyn and Matthias, and thanks to you for the lively discussion. I think we can go on with this discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.